Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell us what city or country you're watching from. Tonight, a black maid refuses one cruel command, and the billionaire standing nearby finally learns what his fiancée has been doing behind the locked doors of his mansion. I'm a maid, not your slave. Amara Reed's voice cut through the winter garden so sharply that the string quartet stopped playing. Across from her, Vivienne Hart stood in a gown, one hand gripping a service contract and the other pointing toward the marble floor. "Pick it up," Vivienne said. At her feet lay hundreds of place cards. Vivienne had thrown them there after discovering one guest's title had been printed incorrectly. 30 employees stood frozen beneath the glass ceiling. Florists, servers, drivers, and cooks watched from behind orchids. None dared move. At the far end of the garden, billionaire Julian Ashford had just entered through the terrace doors. He had returned from London early. Vivienne had not seen him. Amara already had. But she did not change her posture. Vivienne stepped closer. "You were hired to obey. I was hired to maintain this house. You were hired because I approved your name." "No," Amara replied. "The estate manager hired me because 6 maids resigned in 3 weeks. Get on your knees, collect every card, rewrite them, and remain here until they are perfect. The reception begins in 4 hours. Then work faster. And this contract." Vivienne lifted the document. "It confirms that you are personally assigned to me until the wedding. You will be available at any hour, surrender your phone during every shift, and accept any household deduction I consider appropriate." Amara looked at the final page. It authorized Vivienne to withhold wages for damaged decorations, delayed meals, missed calls, and something described as emotional inconvenience. "You cannot make staff sign this," Amara said. "I can replace anyone who refuses." "Then replace me." Vivienne laughed. "Women like you always pretend pride will pay the rent." Julian stopped behind a row of palms. For the past year, Vivienne had described the mansion staff as devoted. Whenever someone resigned, she blamed illness, family obligations, or better offers. Now Julian saw fear on every face. Vivienne leaned close to Amara. "You need this job." "I need work," Amara replied. "I do not need humiliation." Vivienne grabbed Amara's apron. "Say that again." Amara removed Vivienne's hand. Calmly. "I'm a maid, not your slave." Julian stepped out from behind the palms. "And she will never be treated like one in my home." Vivienne turned. Her face lost all color. "Julian?" He crossed the garden and stopped beside Amara, not beside the woman he was supposed to marry in 9 days. The staff watched in stunned disbelief. Vivienne forced a smile. "You misunderstand. She disrupted the rehearsal and insulted me." Julian looked at the scattered cards. "Did she throw those?" Vivienne hesitated. "No, but did she write this contract?" "She needs structure." Julian took the pages and read the deductions. "This is not structure. It is coercion. It was reviewed by household legal. No member of my legal team would approve this." Vivienne crossed her arms. "Then ask Mr. Calder." At the estate manager's name, several employees looked away. "Where is Calder?" Julian asked. "At the city office." Amara reached into her apron pocket and placed a brass locker token on the table. "I found this in the laundry chute this morning." The token carried the Ashford Foundation crest and the number 214. Julian picked it up. "That system was discontinued 5 years ago." "Not completely," Amara said. "The staff changing rooms still use the old lockers." "What does this have to do with Calder?" "Locker 214 contains copies of every private service contract signed during the last 8 months. Vivienne's face went still. "Each contract directs wage deductions to a company called Hart Domestic Consulting." Julian looked at his fiancée. "Hart? It is a staffing vendor." "Owned by whom?" Vivienne said nothing. "Her mother," Amara answered. The garden erupted in whispers. Julian unfolded the contract. At the bottom was a routing number from the bank handling Vivienne's family trust. "How much has been taken?" he asked. A dishwasher stepped forward. 7,000 from me. A driver followed. 11,000. Then the florist, pastry chef, and 2 housekeepers spoke. Vivienne raised her voice. They damaged property. They agreed to the deductions. They agreed because Calder threatened to blacklist them, Amara said. Julian turned toward her. How do you know? Yesterday he tried to make me sign. And you refused. I asked for a copy. What happened? He locked me in the linen accounting room for 3 hours. Julian stared at Vivienne. She looked genuinely surprised. That was not my order. Amara studied her reaction. Vivienne was cruel. She had benefited from the contracts. But the locked room had frightened her too. Julian called security. Find Calder. Seal every staff file. Freeze all payments to Hart Domestic Consulting. The terrace doors suddenly slammed shut. Every light in the winter garden went dark. A mechanical voice sounded through the ceiling. Emergency climate purge activated. Cold air blasted from the vents. Then a message appeared across the glass wall in glowing red letters. Amara Reed should have signed. Julian moved closer to her. Vivienne backed away from both of them. And somewhere inside the mansion, the missing estate manager began locking every exit. The temperature inside the winter garden dropped so quickly that frost crawled across the glass panels. Julian grabbed a metal chair and slammed it against the terrace doors. The reinforced glass did not move. Everyone away from the vents, Amara ordered. Use the banquet curtains as blankets. Keep the older staff in the center. The employees obeyed her before they looked at Julian. He noticed. Vivienne stood beneath the red message, staring at Amara's name. Calder knew she refused the contract, Julian said. How? Amara pointed toward the ceiling camera. Because he has been watching every staff conversation. Julian took out his phone. There was no signal. The quartet's violinist lifted his instrument case. There's a maintenance hatch behind the orchid wall. Vivienne shook her head. That passage was sealed during renovations. Only from the garden side, Amara said. She pulled the orchids aside and found a narrow panel secured by 4 decorative screws. A server produced a corkscrew, and Julian loosened them. Behind the panel was not an escape route. It was a control cabinet. Rows of switches governed the lights, doors, vents, and humidity system. One slot in the center was empty. Amara recognized its shape. A staff time card. Julian looked at her. Why would a climate system require an employee card? It doesn't. Calder connected staff identification to the mansion controls. Vivienne's expression changed. That was part of the attendance upgrade. No, Amara replied. It gave him a way to make any employee's card appear responsible for whatever happened here. Julian thought of every worker fired for entering restricted rooms, damaging equipment, or leaving doors unsecured. How many dismissals did Calder approve? He asked. Mr. Hale answered from the darkness. 23 this year. Amara removed her own time card. If I use this, the system may unlock. Or record that you activated the purge, Julian said. That is what he wants. She inserted it anyway. The red message disappeared. For 1 second, every door unlocked. Then an alarm screamed. Julian forced the terrace doors open while Marcus and security rushed in. Employees poured out, wrapped in curtains and coughing from the cold. The control screen displayed. Purge authorized, Amara Reed. Vivienne looked at Julian. Now do you understand? Calder is framing her. Amara removed her card. He framed every employee who challenged him. Marcus checked the central system. Calder's access code is moving through the east wing. Julian led the team toward the staff administration floor. Vivienne followed until he stopped her. You stay with security. This concerns my family company. It concerns attempted murder. Her face tightened. You think I ordered the purge? I think you created a house where Calder knew no employee would be believed. The words struck harder than shouting. Julian continued with Amara and Marcus. They reached Calder's office and found the door open. The room had been emptied. No computer. No files. No personal belongings. Only a wedding seating chart remained on the wall. Amara walked closer. Certain guest names had been circled in blue: 3 labor attorneys, 2 city inspectors, the director of a domestic worker protection group, and Julian's chief auditor. Why circle them? Marcus asked. Because they were never supposed to attend, Amara said. Julian studied the list. They all accepted. Not anymore. Marcus checked his phone as the signal returned. Each circled guest had received a cancellation message, supposedly from Julian's office. Calder had been removing anyone who might recognize the contracts as illegal. Amara noticed one uncircled name handwritten at the bottom. Elias Hart. Vivienne's father. Julian frowned. He told us he was recovering in Zurich. Amara pulled the seating chart away from the wall. Behind it was a shallow safe. The door stood open. Inside lay photographs showing Elias Hart entering Vale House late at night, meeting Calder in the bookkeeping room, and carrying payroll boxes through the service entrance. Vivienne appeared in the doorway despite Julian's order. She picked up one photograph. My father cannot walk without a cane. The man in the picture stood upright. He can when he thinks no one is watching, Amara said. Vivienne's hands began to shake. Julian turned over the photograph. The date was the night Vivienne's mother supposedly died in a private clinic. Another photograph showed Mrs. Hart alive 3 months later, signing documents beside Calder. Vivienne sank into a chair. My mother is dead. Who identified her body? Amara asked. My father. Did you see her? No. Marcus searched the safe and found an audio recorder. The first file contained Calder's voice. Once Vivienne marries Ashford, Hart Domestic Consulting becomes an approved Vale vendor. The wedding gives us permanent access to payroll. A second voice answered. Elias Hart. And my daughter. She believes the deductions fund the family trust. She cannot learn her mother is cooperating. Julian looked at Vivienne. You knew money was being taken. Yes, she whispered. I believed it was being placed into a reserve for staff damages. You never checked. I did not care enough to check. It was the first honest thing she had said. The recorder continued. Calder described a second plan. On the wedding morning, a fire inspection would close the employee housing complex. Hundreds of workers would be moved into Hart-owned buildings, allowing them to triple charges taken from the Vale Foundation. Amara's face hardened. Families are living there now. Marcus called the complex. No one answered. Then every phone received the same emergency alert. Gas leak reported at Ashford worker residences. Evacuation failed. A live security feed appeared on Calder's screen. Residents were pounding on electronically locked lobby doors. Among them was Amara's younger sister, Keisha, holding her 6-month-old baby. Calder's voice came through the speakers. You had one job, Amara. Sign the contract and remain silent. A countdown appeared. 28 minutes until the building's ventilation system shut down. Julian stepped beside Amara. You are not facing him alone. She looked at the screen, then at the billionaire who had publicly chosen her side. Then prove it, she said. Help me save every person your company failed to protect. The countdown fell to 27 minutes. Julian, Amara, Marcus, and Vivienne raced toward the underground garage while security teams contacted the fire department. The worker residences stood 12 miles away, but Calder had disabled the emergency controls and redirected every maintenance call to an empty office. Amara kept the live feed open. Her sister Keisha stood inside the lobby with dozens of families. The electronic doors would not release, and the windows had been sealed during an energy upgrade approved by Hart Domestic Consulting. Keisha lifted the baby as people began coughing. Amara, she said toward the security camera. Something is coming through the vents. Vivienne stopped beside the SUV. That is not natural gas. Amara turned on her. How do you know? My father once showed me a system that used a harmless odor, then released sedative vapor during emergencies. Why would employee housing need that? Julian demanded. It didn't. He said it was for private clinics. Amara's face hardened. Your family tested it on workers. I never saw it used. But you knew it existed. Vivienne opened the rear door. Hate me after they are safe. They reached the residence in 14 minutes. Fire crews surrounded the building, but the lobby doors remained locked. Cutting power had failed because the system switched to hidden batteries. Residents pressed against the glass while grey vapor drifted through the corridors. A fire captain met Julian. The walls contain old gas pipes. We cannot use explosive tools until we know what is inside. Amara ran along the side of the building. There should be a laundry intake. Behind overflowing bins, they found a narrow metal service hatch. Marcus forced it open. I'm going in, Amara said. Julian caught her arm. You do not know what the vapor will do. My sister and her baby are inside. I'm coming. No. Calder expects you. Your access code may trigger something else. Vivienne removed a jeweled hairpin and handed it to Amara. The old heart systems use a manual release beneath the lobby desk. This might open it. Amara stared at her. You expect me to trust you? No. Test every word. Just move. Wearing a firefighter's breathing mask, Amara crawled through the chute and emerged inside the laundry room. 2 maintenance workers lay unconscious beside the machines. She checked their breathing, dragged them near a floor vent, then entered the corridor. Calder's voice sounded from the speakers. You always believed courage made you difficult to control. Amara kept moving. It only makes you predictable. Security cameras turned as she passed. You joined the mansion because Mrs. Alvarez contacted you, Calder continued. But you never asked who gave her your number. Amara slowed. I did. Then you should have wondered why she found it inside a payroll envelope. He had lured her into Vale House. The contracts, locker token, and even the failed systems had been placed where she would find them. Calder wanted someone credible to expose Vivienne. Then he would frame Julian and present Amara as the angry former employee behind both scandals. You needed me to speak publicly, Amara said. I needed everyone to believe you. She reached the lobby. Keisha saw her through the glass and began crying. Amara dropped behind the reception desk and searched for the release. The hairpin fit the cylinder. 1 pin moved. Then another. The third remained locked. The countdown showed 11 minutes. Outside, Julian saw Amara struggling. He turned to Vivienne. What did you leave out? Nothing. The key does not work. Vivienne studied the mechanism. My father changed the 3rd pin after my mother disappeared. Changed it to what? A blood contact. The system recognizes Hart family DNA. Marcus objected, but Julian ordered firefighters to open the service hatch. Vivienne crawled through alone. When she reached the lobby, Amara stood between her and the trapped families. One wrong move. I know. Vivienne pressed her thumb against a silver plate beneath the lock. A green light appeared. The lobby doors opened. Firefighters rushed inside and carried residents into fresh air. Amara reached Keisha and took the baby while paramedics treated her sister. Then the building alarm changed. Marcus checked the panel. The vapor stopped, but the basement temperature is rising. The fire captain examined the plans. There is no basement listed. Vivienne went pale. There is always a lower room in my father's buildings. Amara handed the baby to a paramedic. What is inside it? I don't know. They entered through a utility door behind reception. A stairway descended beneath the residence. At the bottom stood rows of servers, payroll terminals, surveillance screens, and shelves filled with employee belongings. Passports. Medical records. Birth certificates. Bank cards. Calder had built a private identity archive beneath their homes. Julian lifted a folder bearing Keisha's name. Inside were photographs of her routine, her baby's appointments, and Amara entering the mansion. This is how he chose pressure points, Amara said. Every worker above us was a file before they were a person. Marcus connected an evidence drive to the main server. The screen requested executive authorization. Julian entered his code. Access denied. Vivienne tried hers. Access denied. A third box appeared. Authorized beneficiary, Eleanor Hart. Vivienne stared at her mother's name. She is alive. A video window opened. Eleanor Hart appeared inside a bright office. She was older than in the photographs, but unmistakably alive. Vivienne, she said, you were never supposed to find this room. You let me believe you were dead. I allowed your father to believe I had disappeared. You signed documents with Calder. I was gathering evidence. Amara looked at the shelves. For 7 years. Calder controlled hundreds of identities. I could not leave without exposing them. Julian pointed to the authorization prompt. Unlock the server. I cannot do it remotely. The system requires the original beneficiary seal. Where is it? With Elias. A sound came from the stairwell. Elias Hart descended slowly, holding a black case and no cane. 2 armed men followed him. Vivienne stared at the father she had believed was disabled. You used me. Elias smiled. I raised you to understand power. You confused cruelty with control. Julian moved in front of Amara. Elias opened the case. Inside was a gold seal engraved with Eleanor's name. The archive belongs to me, he said. Calder was merely the accountant. Amara understood. Calder was not the mastermind. He was the employee Elias intended to sacrifice, just as Calder planned to sacrifice Vivienne. Elias raised a remote. The server room doors locked. Above them, hundreds of rescued residents stood beside firefighters, unaware that every stolen identity record was about to be erased. Give me the Veil authorization codes, Elias told Julian, or this archive burns with everyone trapped below. Vivienne stepped away from her father and stood beside Amara. For the first time, she chose a side without expecting protection. No, she said. You have taken enough from them. Elias pressed the first button. Metal shutters covered the stairwell. A second countdown appeared on every screen. 5 minutes until thermal destruction. The heat began rising beneath their feet almost immediately. And this time, there was no hidden passage left to find. The 5-minute countdown flashed across every monitor. Heat climbed through the soles of Amara's shoes as burners awakened beneath the server floor. Elias Hart stood beyond the central console, while his 2 guards blocked the sealed stairwell. Veil authorization codes, he repeated. Now. Julian moved closer to Amara, placing himself between her and the nearest weapon. You will not get them. Elias smiled. Then every identity in this room disappears, along with the witnesses who found it. Vivienne stared at her father. You built this beneath homes filled with families. I built leverage. You taught me to treat people like possessions. I taught you not to become one. Amara looked at the screens. The thermal system was not heating the entire room equally. Red warning bars rose beneath the server racks, while the strip around the main console remained cooler. Marcus, she whispered, the floor is zoned. He followed her gaze. The destruction system protects the control platform. Because Elias plans to survive long enough to confirm the files are gone. Elias heard her. Still solving rooms, Miss Reed? No, Amara replied. I'm solving you. She stepped toward the shelves containing employee records. 1 guard raised his weapon. Julian stepped with her. Lower it, he said. Elias laughed. You think standing beside a maid makes you noble? Julian did not look away from the guard. No. It makes me less blind than I was yesterday. Amara reached Keisha's file and pulled out the plastic employee card clipped inside. Every folder contained one. Calder's system had connected identities to doors, payroll, cameras, and emergency controls. The same cards used to imprison workers might also interrupt the purge. She slid Keisha's card into a reader beside the archive shelves. The countdown stopped at 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Then it resumed. But 1 server rack went dark. Marcus understood. Each employee card shuts down the section holding that person's data. Amara looked at hundreds of folders. There are too many. Vivienne grabbed a box and began feeding cards into the readers. Elias's expression changed. Stop her. 1 guard moved toward Vivienne. Julian struck his wrist, forcing the weapon aside as Marcus tackled the second man. A shot exploded into the ceiling. Dust fell, alarms shrieked, and the room erupted. Amara kept inserting cards. One rack after another powered down. Vivienne joined her, hands shaking as she pulled identification cards from the very files her family had used to control people. "You cannot save all of them," Elias shouted. "No," Amara said. "But we can save enough to prove what you did." Elias raised the remote toward the servers. Vivienne saw him first. "Amara." She shoved Amara aside as Elias pressed the second button. A burst of heat shot from beneath the shelves. Vivienne fell against the floor, screaming as her palm struck the metal grate. Amara dragged her onto the cooler control platform. The countdown dropped below 2 minutes. Julian wrestled the first guard against a cabinet. Marcus disarmed the second and slammed him face down. Elias backed toward the console, still holding the beneficiary seal. On the monitor, Eleanor Hart's face reappeared. "Vivienne, listen to me. The seal opens the master relay, but it must be placed against the beneficiary plate while a Veil executive cancels the purge." Julian reached for the console. Elias pointed the remote at him. "One more step and I release the accelerant." Amara looked at Vivienne's burned hand. "You know where he keeps the seal." Vivienne nodded toward Elias's jacket. "He always hides valuables inside the left lining." Elias realized too late. Vivienne rose despite the pain and walked toward him. "Give it to me. You chose strangers over your father." "No," she said. "I chose the people you taught me not to see." He grabbed her injured wrist. Vivienne cried out, but held his gaze. "You made me cruel because cruel people are easy to direct. They never notice who benefits from their anger." Elias tightened his grip. "And now you believe one brave act erases everything?" "No." She pulled him close as if collapsing. Then she tore open the lining of his jacket. The gold seal fell. Amara caught it before it hit the floor. Elias swung the remote toward her, but Julian drove his shoulder into Elias's chest. The two men crashed against the console. The remote slid beneath a server rack. "Now!" Eleanor shouted from the screen. Amara pressed the seal against the beneficiary plate. Julian entered his authorization code. The console demanded a third approval. "Authorized employee representative." "There is no representative registered," Marcus said. Amara looked at the archive reader. Every worker card had been treated as property of the system. But one card had never been entered. Hers. She removed her Vale House time card from her pocket and placed it against the final panel. The screen flashed red. Access revoked, Amara Reed. Calder had removed her authority the moment she challenged the contract. The countdown reached 40 seconds. Julian looked at the panel. "Use mine. It requires an employee, not an owner." Vivienne pulled her own engagement access card from her purse. "That card marks you as household executive," Julian said. "Not anymore." She snapped the gold edge against the console, peeling away the decorative layer. Beneath it was a staff credential. Her father had never made her an owner. He had registered his daughter as an employee. Vivienne stared at the word printed beneath the surface. Domestic operations staff. "All this time," she whispered, "I was another file." Amara took the card. "You do not have to remain one." She pressed it to the panel. 3 authorizations turned green. Purge cancelled. At 7 seconds, the burners died. The shutters lifted. Cold emergency air flooded the room as firefighters and police rushed down the stairs. Elias tried to crawl toward the remote, but Vivienne stepped on his hand. No more orders. Officers pulled him upright. He looked at his daughter with disgust. "You will go to prison with me." Vivienne's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. "Then at least I will enter it telling the truth." Eleanor remotely unlocked the archive. Marcus copied the records before investigators removed the servers. The files revealed years of wage theft, identity fraud, illegal surveillance, coercive contracts, and medical experimentation involving sedative systems installed in worker residences. Calder was arrested at an airfield before dawn. He had expected Elias to destroy the evidence and blame everything on Vivienne, Julian, and Amara. Instead, the recovered archive contained his voice recordings, payment instructions, and forged security reports. Elias Hart faced charges for kidnapping, attempted murder, trafficking in stolen identities, fraud, unlawful detention, and conspiracy. His companies were frozen, and every employee document was returned under federal supervision. Eleanor Hart entered protective custody and testified that she had spent years collecting evidence after discovering Elias planned to use their daughter as the legal face of his crimes. Her silence had protected some victims, but it had also left Vivienne trapped under her father's influence. She admitted that truth publicly. Vivienne did not escape consequences. She confessed to wage coercion, unlawful deductions, threats, and abuse of mansion staff. Her testimony helped dismantle the Hart network, but the court still sentenced her to prison and ordered restitution from her trust. Before she was taken away, she asked to speak to Amara. They met in a courthouse corridor. Vivienne's burned hand was wrapped in bandages. "I meant what I said in the mansion," she told her. "I believed you existed to obey me." Amara said nothing. "I am not asking you to forgive me." "Good." Vivienne looked down. "You stood up to me before anyone powerful stood beside you." "I had been standing up long before Julian noticed." Vivienne nodded. "I know that now." Amara stepped closer. "Knowing is not change. What you do with the truth after it costs you something, that is change." Vivienne was led away. Months later, Julian reopened the worker residences under an independent housing board elected by employees. Hart Domestic Consulting was dissolved, every deduction was repaid with interest, and workers forced to resign received compensation. The mansion changed too. No private service contracts were permitted. No executive could hold employee identification documents. Complaints went directly to an outside worker council, not household management. Julian offered Amara a position overseeing estate operations. She declined. "I did not fight to replace one person at the top." "What do you want?" he asked. "A system where no maid has to wait for a billionaire to believe her." Together with the staff, Amara created an independent domestic workers protection office funded by the Ashford estate but controlled by elected employees. She accepted the role of its first director only after the workers voted for her. Julian did not place her beneath him or pretend one defense erased years of neglect. He stood beside her. At the office opening, cameras filled the winter garden where Vivienne had once thrown place cards onto the floor. Amara wore a charcoal suit. Behind her stood maids, drivers, cooks, gardeners, and cleaners from across the city. Julian remained at the edge of the stage until Amara called him forward. "This house confused obedience with respect," she said. "That ends today." A reporter asked Julian why he had given employees authority over his own estate. He looked at Amara. "Because she was right. Employment is not ownership, wealth is not permission, and silence is not loyalty." Keisha watched from the front row with her baby asleep against her shoulder. Mrs. Alvarez stood beside her. The employees who once lowered their eyes now looked toward the cameras. After the ceremony, Julian found Amara beside the glass wall. "You changed this house," he said. "No," she replied. "The truth changed it. I just refused to whisper." He smiled. The day Vivienne ordered her to kneel, Amara had declared that she was a maid, not a slave. Julian's most crucial choice had not been rescuing her or speaking for her. It was understanding that she never needed him to give her dignity. She only needed him to stop standing in its way, and then, when the truth demanded courage, to stand beside her.